Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is scheduled to announce new economic sanctions against Iran later today. At a press conference, Bessent will reveal what he calls the toughest sanctions in history. The Trump administration plans to focus on isolating Iran, warning other countries to stop doing business with Tehran. Bessent previewed the plan in an opinion piece for the Financial Times yesterday, where he called the sanctions economic D-Day for Iran. Iran is dismissing the threat, saying it can counter and will maintain economic ties with other nations. But that contradicts a push from some of Iran's top politicians who are calling for an end to the war in hopes of stabilizing an economy in free fall.
He's expected to reveal the specific new measures that the Trump administration is expected to impose on Iran and really try to isolate it, particularly, of course, its economy from the rest of the world. Now, the president and other top administration officials have described this new announcement as being the most comprehensive assault on Iran thus far, of course, on Iran's economy specifically. Now, I will say that and I mentioned this, but Bessent and Trump, what they are describing is really this new coordination that the U.S. is hoping to have with allies to try and sever all economic ties with Iran, but also have allies sever those ties as well. And you heard Bessent explain a little more of this in that op-ed. I want to read for you this quote. He said, "Total financial isolation can obviate the need for American force while enlarging the sphere of freedom for our allies." Later in the op-ed, he writes, "The world should understand that our objective is to sever every economic lifeline that sustains the tyrannical regime until Iran stands alone." Now, I do want to just give you a little bit of a picture of where Iran is at this point, because, of course, we know the Trump administration has already been trying to impose a lot of economic pain on the country over the last several months. Iran's currency has now dropped to a record low against the dollar as the U.S. continues to try and move and tighten their economy even further. There are questions, though, about which allies and specifically even some adversaries what the relationship with the U.S. and how they're going to respond to this. And, of course, I think the big one is being China. We know that China relies on Iran for its oil more than any other country in the world. We heard Bessent address this in recent days as well. He essentially argued that China was aligned with the U.S. when it came to finding a resolution to the Iran war and to reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Bessent said on CNBC last week that many conversations are best to have in private, and that they're confident that everyone wants the strait reopened and for energy prices to come back down. Look, I do think, though, some context here and kind of underscoring the bottom line is that this war has turned from one that is being fought militarily, a lot of those tit-for-tat strikes between the U.S. and Iran as negotiations have fallen apart, to now being a full economic focus. And this is something coming from the top. The president has told his advisors in recent weeks to seize negotiations as they turn to this new strategy. So more details coming around this press conference this afternoon, John.
Who counts in Trump's America? And you write in part this. On the afternoon of August 2nd, the Trump team delivered a bombshell that is highly political ahead of this year's midterm elections and amid wider fights about gerrymandering and Trump's insistence that the 2020 election was rigged. They explained that when America holds its next census in 2030, technical reforms will make it hard to publish the data about race and gender. The statisticians were shocked since they, not politicians, usually handle technical reforms. Worrying about the state of America's statistics might not seem that urgent given all the other explosive political rows swirling in Washington. But voters should pay attention. For at the heart of this story, there are three key questions. Can anyone paint an accurate portrait of what America is today? If so, how should this shape voting processes, and can this data be trusted in an era of manipulation, cyber hacks, and artificial intelligence?
Thank you. I mean, the census is a classic example of something linked to infrastructure, which seems incredibly boring. Everyone ignores most of the time because it's basically geeky and a bit nerdy. but in reality is crucial because it doesn't just shape how we measure the economy, which businesses and investors rely on. It also has a huge impact on the political system because it shapes how House seats are essentially allocated. And what's fascinating is that although 99.9% of voters just ignore it, Republicans have noticed that it's potentially got a lot of importance, and they are essentially mounting a very quiet campaign to reshape how the census is done in two ways. Firstly, to add a question about citizenship to the 2030 census, which many people would argue is unconstitutional because the Constitution says you have to count everybody, irrespective of status. And secondly, they're trying to change some of the technical ways that privacy protections are put into the census that effectively mean it's going to be almost impossible to publish detailed data on race or gender, or even much detailed data on minorities in small communities at all. Now, they're saying they're doing that to protect people's privacy, but many of the community activist groups are really upset because they argue essentially what's happening is you're blurring a picture of what America is. And that's got all kinds of implications for how we imagine politics going forward, most notably that it'll be harder to measure impacts of policies around things like race and gender.
And we don't know. We don't know if Iran is going to emerge the most powerful country in the region if we continue to put economic pressure on them. If we give them the MOU, or that we had proposed over 6 months ago, then yes, they would have been the most powerful country in the region. If we took sanctions off of oil, which we foolishly did for several weeks, then yes, we would help them become the most powerful country in the region. But if we continue to grind them down economically, not militarily, economically, then we don't know, what I've been saying from the very beginning, if tomorrow we wake up and it looks like the Soviet Union's empire in 1989. Listen, their economy was on the precipice before this war began. There were riots in the streets. They were having to kill 20,000 people in the streets because the economy was so bad in Iran before this war. In December, January, February. Now, from February 28th to today, imagine how much worse that economy has gotten. If we can figure out, if Scott Bessent can figure out how to sanction China or how to cut off China from buying their oil, from cutting off their supply that way, then yes, Iran can be isolated and Iran can be brought to the table and we can have a deal to end this war in a way that doesn't make them more powerful than they were when the war started. But we're only going to get there economically. We will not get there militarily. That's what they want. They want us to keep firing missiles at them because that just strengthens them. It really does, and they're standing with the people. But economically, it's a good lever for us to use. We'll see what Scott Bessent has to say this afternoon. And if he actually, because as Caddy said, we've already maxed out in a lot of sanctions with Iran. We'll see, though, how to turn the heat up even more on Iran economically. And if so, maybe some more politicians will come out and say, hey, it's time for us to sue for peace.
I wouldn't call it tearing down the state so much as personalizing the state. All elements of the state are being put in the service of the person Donald Trump, being pulled from their primary purposes, being pulled from their primary areas of competence, being remade from the inside out to serve Donald Trump. And this is core to his authoritarian project. I mean, look, we have to understand that he looks at a Xi Jinping out there, he looks at a Vladimir Putin out there, and he sees peers with whom he envies in some ways. He envies their autonomy. He envies their authority. And as we've seen with the Canadian trade wars, he envies their spheres of influence. And so he is directing everything in on himself. And this is inherently corrupt. People can see that it's inherently corrupt. And when they're struggling economically or they're dissatisfied economically or they see all of these self-inflicted wounds that are focused in on Trump and not for their benefit, they get angry And you're beginning to see rumblings here in this country that remind me a bit of the popular revulsion ultimately at Viktor Orban in Hungary. Authoritarianism does not sell, especially when people feel insecure financially.
Yeah, I mean, look, Iran's economy is already a basket case. Their currency is $2 million to the U.S. dollar. I mean, it can't get much worse beyond this. I mean, and obviously the ruling regime in Iran doesn't really, care that much about how much its people suffer. We've seen that with the execution of 53,000 individuals. So I'm not sure what levers they're going to pull. And again, as was said in the prior segment, this is really about China. China is Iran's benefactor to a certain extent. And so unless this includes China and retaliatory sanctions against them for having dealt with Iran favorably, it's not that meaningful in a certain sense. And so, again, it's something that I guess the Treasury Secretary will explain. He may also talk about his plans to lower interest rates by buying bonds as a separate issue. So there's a lot coming this afternoon that we have to listen to with respect to the Treasury Secretary. But again, I'm not quite sure what kind of firepower they have against Iran economically, unless it includes China and Russia to a certain extent.
It's Monday, 24 August, year of our Lord 2026. A pretty action-packed day in Washington, D.C. Let's go to the White House and Neil McCabe. Neil, I think it's interesting that the Secretary of Treasury, Scott Bessent, our own Scott Bessent, is going to announce D-Day, or the economic warfare proposal, at 1 p.m. It's been shifted because there's going to be an event at the White House, I think on school choice at about 2:30. But this is not going to be done in the Oval Office. This is not going to be done in the Roosevelt Room. This is not going to be done in the East Room. This is going to be done in the over at the Treasury Department, where he's going to declare economic war on the Persians. What do you know, sir? Tee us up. It's going to be 1 p.m. Ravel, cover it live. We're going to have commentary and observations on it at 5 o'clock when we return. What do you know so far?
Yeah, so far, Secretary Bessent has really signaled his turn because he's telling the financial markets this is coming, so it's not going to be a shock, but it is going to be serious and it is going to be real. And there's a lot of people who have great reputations in this cabinet, but no one has the reputation in the financial markets that Scott Bessent has for what he did to the Bank of England and what he did in Japan. And so now he is engaged. There was talk earlier in this conflict that we wanted to preserve the Iranian oil facilities and oil refineries and storage because we wanted to help them finance their recovery from the conflict. And I think there was some hesitancy to go full bore on economic sanctions because the idea was, hey, when this thing is over, we're going to have to rebuild this country, or they're going to have to figure out how to recover from it. That's all over now. And so they're going to find out they have a blockade with the U.S. Navy, and they have to deal with Scott Bessent.
Yeah, okay, hang on. I want to keep you there. We're going to get Navarro after the break to talk about this trade war that's kind of this brushfire war that's heated up over the weekend. I'm going to come back to you because I want to get back into this economic war. I mean, right now it's going to be a quarantine of all oil shipments. They are letting out shipments. They are letting out, or the Navy's letting out from Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, a complete quarantine and blockade of Iranian oil. Secondary sanctions, not just sanctions on the regime, but most importantly, secondary sanctions on European companies. Most importantly, the Chinese Communist Party. Banks, they're going to supposedly go after banks of our quote-unquote allies in the Middle East, Dubai, which is a money laundering center for the regime. Most importantly, is it going to include Chinese banks? Because you could argue this is really economic warfare against the Chinese Communist Party. The Iranians just have to be an intermediary. Also, currency. They already talked about the rial, which is the Persian currency, 2 million to 1 to a U.S. dollar. Scott Bessent crushed it in January. That's what led to the revolt in the streets. And last but not least, to cut off with our allies any overland approach through our ally Pakistan to rearm them, send component pieces, and do trade. A comprehensive economic D-Day supposedly announced at 1 p.m. We get Neil back on to talk about, are we going to see this through to the bitter end? Short commercial break. Dr. Peter Navarro join us about a trade war with the gangsters up in Canada next in the War Room.
Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
What a way to start off a week. We're about to declare full-scale, comprehensive economic war against the Persians, something we should have kept on in January. If Scott Bessent had been allowed to execute this plan in January, we wouldn't be in the situation we are. Of course, America's greatest ally, Tel Aviv, Levin, and those guys, Mike Pence, Judas Pence, live from Kiev over the weekend, saying we got to finish militarily, we got to go in and take it all down. Anyway, we'll get back. We're going to go back to the White House, Neil McCabe. We're going to spend some time on this morning. Also, Trita Parsi is going to join us towards the end of the show. We're going to talk through what the real impact people believe this is going to have. Peter Navarro's joined us. Let me play a short clip from Stephanie Ruhl's show this morning. Then this is about a brush fire war on trade that has really exploded over the last 72 hours. The Wall Street Journal, who is Peter Navarro's biggest fan, says this is the dumbest trade war in human history. Let's go ahead and see Stephanie Ruhl. We're bringing Dr. Navarro.
In Maine, but what do you think it means for the average American?
Initially, it's not that big. I mean, most of Canadian-U.S. trade is still covered by the USMCA, more than 80%. This is hockey sticks, it's alcohol,
ice skates.
It's ice skates. I mean, it's symbolic, I guess. So I think in and of itself, it's probably not going to push up prices that much, but it certainly doesn't help. And it comes at a time when it's becoming more and more clear that tariffs do feed through to the ordinary consumer, and this will just be another one.
Yeah, they feed through to the American consumer, and when and if the Supreme Court shoots down the tariffs, businesses get that money back. We're seeing it happens in the tunes of tens of millions of dollars, but you and me, Target ain't giving us a refund.
Okay, Dr. Peter Navarro joins us. Hey, Doc, I'm kind of confused here, so help me out. In the first term, you and Lighthizer had the Chinese Communist Party up against the wall when they refused to sign the trade deal in May of 2019. And ever since then, it's been full-on unrestricted warfare by the Chinese Communist Party against President Trump, President Trump's administration, and anything related to MAGA or standing up to him. However, the signature trade deal of the first term, I would actually argue, although I was not a fan of all of it, was the USMCA, which was the new deal, I guess, with Mexico and that replaced NAFTA, Mexico and Canada. So where do we stand now? Why are we at a trade war? Has USMCA been thrown away? Is Carney? Because people I also don't think realize Canada is a collection of gangsters when it comes to business, when it comes to tariffs, when it comes to who runs Western Canada, which is really in the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. Tell us what's going on here, because I think this has caught a lot of people by surprise, given the fact that we had USMCA, and I guess you guys are in the process of thinking through a renegotiation, sir.
Steve, let's start with USMCA. The measure of any trade deal we have with any country in the world is whether it reduces significantly our trade deficit or gets the trade deficit down to zero. And the problem we have with USMCA, particularly with Mexico, is the trade deficit has ballooned. Canada, it's a slightly different problem in that they severely discriminate against in three major areas: the alcohol, beverage, the dairy, and the autos. That's how this got started. We put out a 338 discrimination proclamation. It basically says, stop doing that, or we're going to put these tariffs on. Just historically, Steve, I want to echo something that Jameson Greer said over the weekend on the Sunday shows. There's two countries in the world that have responded with retaliation to the U.S. tariffs, the reciprocal fair tariffs. Communist China and Canada. And dating back to the period of time, Steve, between the election of Donald John Trump in 2016. And the inauguration, Wilbur Ross and I began negotiating with the Canadians on what would become USMCA. And I can tell you that as much as I love my brothers and sisters in Canada, and I think it's a great country, the people who guide their trade policy are some of the sleaziest people, double dealing I've ever met. And the problem, I think they have like an inflated sense of themselves, because when they originally initiated NAFTA, we were severely out-negotiated. I mean, they were playing checkers, we were playing chess. And part of the carnage of NAFTA was the result of very successful negotiations by Canadians for a really skewed deal. Where we stand now, and I want to speak directly now to the Canadian people, you have a leader in Carney who politically gets stronger by talking tough against Donald John Trump. But for every iota of strength politically Carney gets, your economy gets materially weaker. And Carney is taking you, Canada, down a very dangerous road. Now, with respect to what they do to us, Steve, I mean, let's take autos, for example. I mean, they're screwing us now on autos. The discrimination there is they're giving more preferential treatment. Think about this, Steve, to the Japanese, the Koreans, and the Germans than they are to the Americans. That's like crazy stuff. In terms of alcoholic beverages, they basically banned everything. They're like running like an Iranian hate the Americans, death to American alcohol. They just keep it out of their stores. And that's not right. And then the dairy tariffs have been a thorn in our side since the first term. So this is a dangerous game. I think Canada's playing. It's the smartest thing for the United States to do to hold them accountable on our northern border.
Hang on a second. Just simply, what outcome are we looking for? You hit them with 50% tariffs. They've got a bunch of groups up there that I think run like gangsters. I think Carney's a gangster. I think all he gets is he gets immediate political support by standing up to President Trump, but it's not. It's for the economic detriment of the Canadian people. But by doing this and initiating this, what is the outcome that the president hopes for?
Well, what we always want, Steve, simply is fair and reciprocal trade. I mean, that's all we want. We don't want the American people to lose their jobs and lose their income because countries cheat us. And I want to just emphasize here, Canadians, they're big cheaters. And one of the dangers here over time is communist China, as we put up our own tariffs, communist China is inundating the rest of the world with their excess capacity, building essentially bridgeheads and launch pads into Europe, into the United States. And Canada, because it is so weak and woke politically, and because Carney seems to think standing up to Trump is a good thing, the Chinese are basically having their way with Canada. It's very dangerous. I mean, they're basically going to use or try to use Canada as a launch pad for the electric vehicles that they're just dumping en masse on the world markets. I mean, it's like, you know, they got all their robots and their sweatshop labor and their government subsidies and this, that, and the other thing, building these electric vehicles at costs.
Peter, hasn't the CCP so infiltrated Canada, Canadian business? The western part, Vancouver's really run as a colony of the CCP. You got the Huawei problem up there. It hasn't Canada been so infiltrated by the Chinese Communist Party that this is really, we're dealing really with the CCP. Carney and these guys are just spokesmodels for that. This is really a CCP effort, and that's what you and President Trump are confronting?
Well, think of Canada as like three pieces, okay? The MAGA piece, the sensible piece, the good conservative piece is the Edmonton area, where all the energy is, right? Those folks, the cowboys and their miners and the rough decks and this, that, and the other thing. And they're just sensible folks. And they feel very, very, very punished by Ottawa, where all the liberals are, all the woke folks. And what Ottawa is not paying attention to is precisely what you raised. I mean, Vancouver effectively is Hong Kong. It's crazy stuff what's going on out there. And again, Canada, it's such a sparse. It's just got so much territory, so sparsely populated. Yeah. It's a very easy target for the Chinese to come in and throw a bunch of money around. And rather than trying to come up with a way to work with the Americans in a fair way, politically, again, I want to stress this trade-off. Politically, he wins when he goes up against Trump. Economically, Canada loses. And until the Canadian people themselves stop rewarding Carney in the polls, he's going to keep doing stupid stuff. I mean, I'll be honest with you, Steve. That deal we gave them, that was a friggin'...
We lost Dr. Navarro. Anyway, I'll put up Dr. Navarro's everything, the go-to site for Dr. Navarro, all his content. A brushfire trade war. Chinese Communist Party has completely, totally infiltrated Canada. Like I said, like Navarro said, Vancouver is essentially Hong Kong. And they've infiltrated every aspect of culture, business, economics, politics, all of it. So you're really dealing with them. President Trump throws down the gauntlet, 50% tariffs. Carney tries to respond. We're going to cover this. We're going to go back to the White House, also have Troy Myers from the Epoch Times. 1 million temporary protective illegal aliens ready to ship out of the country. Next in the War Room.
War Room. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
We got Peter Navarro back. Peter, what are your coordinates? By the way, I realize you think we gave him too good a deal the first time. I take it we're not going to do that again. Your thoughts and where do people go for your content, particularly your new Fauci book? Fauci's Got to Rot in Prison.
To be precise, they got a really good deal this time around, and particularly on steel and aluminum. And they're not going to get that again. I don't know what the heck Carney was thinking. He made a mistake. Fauci should rot. Why Fauci should rot in prison? You got to go to Amazon and get this. Forward by Steve Bannon. This thing is coming out. Get one for your friends. I take him down, but most important, I show how this man can be prosecuted despite the pardon, and put him in behind bars for the rest of his life.
Amen.
For where he belongs. I'll tell you, Steve, reading that diary, his diary, and then you read mine, and it's like it's worse than I ever imagined. And I always said he had blood on his hands, and it's 10 times worse when you actually read behind the lines. And the legacy media, Tapper, Maddow on down, they are just as responsible as Fauci is for a lot of what happened. So go to peternavarro.com. Go right now to Amazon. Why Fauci Must Rot in Prison, forward by Stephen K. Bannon. The War Room had a great response the last time you and I talked about this, but we got to really get this out there so we can put Fauci behind bars.
Dr. Navarro, thank you for starting us off today. Appreciate you.
All right, my brother. Take care.
Dr. Peter Navarro from the White House. I'm going to go back to Neil McCabe. Neil, just hang on. I'm going to go back to Neil McCabe at the White House to get more into this economic trade war. We are going to cover the press conference live at 1 o'clock. Poso and others are going to join me back here at 5 to go through what this all means. And are we going to stick to it? Because a lot of it deals with the Chinese Communist Party. Troy Myers joins us from the Epoch Times this morning. A really amazing piece over the weekend on temporary protective status. I think I've had a thing or two to say about this. Let's play the clip and I'll bring Troy in.
You either have a sovereign nation or we're not.
Let them go back to Haiti. Give them a form. They can fill it out to come back. And if people need them, they'll figure out a way to get them back here. Let's fill those jobs up now with folks that are United States citizens. Oh, they won't work. They won't work. Well, I fail to believe that. Maybe you have to pay a different wage. Oh, yeah. Then I said it. Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh. Wall Street Journal, the Murdochs, Arthur Laffer, Steve Moore. Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh. Wages. You mean American citizens wouldn't have to compete with foreign labor, both legal and illegal? Yeah, that's what I mean. They shouldn't have to. The finest broadsheet in this country is the Epoch Times. And one of the reasons is reporters and analysis like Troy Myers, who joins us on temporary protective status. Sir, you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong in your piece, and I want you to back it up now, there's actually, forget the Haitians, they're just part of the equation. There's 1 million temporary protective status individuals that are essentially ready for mass deportations. Is that how I'm supposed to read your piece, sir?
Yes, that is correct, from countries around the world.
So walk me through this. How do we come to this? Because right now they're out in Springfield. The dogs are still upset. They're out in Springfield putting ankle monitors on people. They had a plane leave the other day, the first plane. I think it had 170 folks on it. It wasn't even full. So what's going on? How can we have 1 million? Just walk me through the math of how we got here, and then we can try to talk about how the hell we're going, because this is the lowest hanging fruit of the mass deportations. Troy Myers.
Yes. So, this is an effort that started last in the first Trump administration, I should say. President Trump tried to remove these protections from all these countries in his first term, but he was unsuccessful. He started this effort up again in his second term. He was met with lawsuits like in the first term, but he's had a lot more success this time. He had the Supreme Court hear his case regarding Syria and Haiti. Obviously, the Supreme Court ruled in his favor, and all these other countries, all the judicial rulings, all those blocks fell as a result of that Supreme Court ruling. And I mean, there are tens of thousands of foreign nationals living in the United States under these protections. And El Salvador, their protection statuses are expected to expire in September. And I believe there's over 100,000 El Salvadorans that have been under protected status for at least 5 years, I think. So even more, there's going to be even more that are going to be up for deportations here soon, just this next month.
Troy, if we've been doing this and focused on this from the first term and finally got, even more serious in the second and got ready for the court fights and won at the Supreme Court, and maybe we've just not seen the results here, but it seems like the Haitians, the Syrians, many more as you go into other countries, you lift them all, the 1 million. We're not making a lot of progress. We've made progress in taking away the legal right for the temporary protective status, but we really haven't been at least organized. And I don't know if it's logistics, because we put in $170 billion for mass deportations in the big, beautiful bill, or the supplement to it, and it got passed, so we got the cash. Is it a logistics problem? Is it a money problem? Or is it a political will problem? It doesn't seem like a lot of these folks are getting anything more than an ankle bracelet and a time to come and argue some more, sir.
Yeah, that's a tough question, because I mean, the Trump administration, they ran on mass deportations, and people voted the Trump administration in for mass deportations. And you have over 1 million foreign nationals now up for deportations. And have there been steps behind the scenes being taken to prepare for this mass, potentially a mass deportation effort? It's kind of, we haven't seen that play out yet, unfortunately. We're still waiting. I'm still trying to talk to people from ICE, with DHS, with CBP, and they can't really give out too much, which, is understandable. They're not going to hand out their information on operations that they're going to carry out. But I think the main worry that we have right now, from legal experts I've talked to, is that these people have been warned that they can take a flight home, they can take a $2,600 check if they self-deport, or they can be forcefully removed. But the worry is that these people, they've been living in the United States for so long, they might just try to remain in the United States and live under the radar. So now it's really up to DHS to find and locate these people and really enforce the end of these deportation protections.
But let's okay, I can understand that, but let's talk about like Springfield, Ohio, or certain places. These communities, because when they came here, the government had them congregate. It's a little bit like that scene in The Untouchables. We know where the whiskey is. You just have to have the political will to go beat down the door and go arrest people, particularly prominent at that time government officials and others that were in with the Capone mob in making sure whiskey was made and distributed. Here's the same thing. I mean, there's not a lack of Haitians wandering around Springfield. Like I said, the dogs are still worried. The dogs are saying, "Hey guys, what's going on here?" Right? It's not like it's lost on them. And you've got people going in and they're singling out one guy, putting an ankle monitor on, and then the cameras are all over him because he's crying and saying it's so terrible and he's been in the United States so long, he just wants to stay here. So when you say people want to go underground, right now they're kind of up in our face mocking us, correct?
It does seem like that, yes, but you have to understand, I mean, there's more than 1 million of these people out there. Like, I know we have some main sites like in Michigan, like you mentioned, Dearborn, but these people have probably spread throughout the United States. New York, the governor there, she said that, these protection statuses, the end of them, it's going to cripple, apparently she said it's going to cripple her industries across the state. So it seems like these people have spread out across the United States. It's not just, while we do have some local, not local, but some main areas where these people are, it seems like they've really infiltrated everywhere across the United States. And then again, it also comes down to, I think you mentioned personnel. Well, we know for a fact that Border Patrol has record high recruitment right now. So I think it also comes down to local coordination because a lot of these states and cities, they do not coordinate with ICE and federal officials. Their lawmakers there in Democrat-run areas, they will prevent local law enforcement from cooperating with federal officials. So I think that's also a worry, is having that backup, that on-the-ground local backup is what federal officials really need. And I believe Democrat lawmakers in some of these areas are preventing that from happening. I think this is kind of a coordinated,
and the Republic,
coordinated
Governor
effort.
DeWine in Ohio Governor DeWine in Ohio has made the pitch that the Haitians built Ohio. Right, not Ohioans. The Haitians built Ohio. Real quickly, when you try to do your reporting over at DHS and personnel, are people talking about plans actually to do the mass deportations? Or are you kind of getting, it's tough to draw out, like their plans haven't been formed, or they really don't have any interest in executing, sir?
It's tough. I will say it's tough just being, doing communications over the phone, through emails. It's tough to get actual straight answers from these people. Meeting them face to face, though, I've had meetings with them in San Diego with Border Patrol. I've met with people at ICE in San Diego on the border, and they are much more open to conversations. They say that, yes, we are all throughout the country. We're doing these operations. Secretly, people aren't recording all these, all the stuff you see on social media. That's just a drop in the bucket of what these agents are doing throughout the country. So those face-to-face interactions I have with federal officials, they reveal a lot more stuff about what they're doing throughout the country. But yes, I run into a lot of roadblocks just, trying to call people at DHS and emailing them. It's kind of like pulling teeth, honestly.
Got to tell you, that's why I want everybody, if Elizabeth and Jojo and Mo and Grace and everybody can push this article out from Epoch Times, just read it. You'll see exactly what the pool we have for mass deportations. Then we can start to put pressure on people to focus on this. Troy, what's social media? Where are your coordinates, and where do people go to get all your great reporting in the Epoch Times, since you're a staff writer over there?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'm on X. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. You can. I'm more frequent on X. Yeah, there's my page right now. I think my username's Troy_Myers1, and I'm posting pretty much every day stuff that I'm writing about. Yeah, you can check me out there. Give me a follow.
Troy, thank you so much. Great reporting, a great piece. I think people will after reading it going, what in the hell's going on here? We need action, action, action. They've done the hard first part. The second part ought to be pretty straightforward. Thank you, Troy. Appreciate you. We're going to go, we'll take a short commercial break. Jason Killmeyer from the Daily Caller is going to be here. Remember, he's doing a multi-part series in actually the logistics of mass deportation. He's going to get us up to speed on exactly what's going on, because now we know there's a pool of 1 million low-hanging fruit just sitting there, and the dogs of Springfield are howling. What are you guys up to? Why are you not doing this? So we're going to get the straight answers next. A lot of turmoil over the weekend in capital markets, or discussion of capital markets for the open back up today. Of course, gold's been on a run here recently. It's not just simply the run. It's understand what's going on. Ray Dalio, and Ray Dalio is a guy that's been involved with the Chinese Communist Party for a long time. He's one of the smartest hedge fund managers out there. He's had the largest hedge fund. I think it was Bridgewater before he stepped down. He's recommending dump bonds, buy gold. We're not advocating that. What we're advocating is you read it. Go right now. We're going to put it up. Thank you. Eventually going to put it up. Maybe we're going to put it out so everybody gets it. Birchgold.com, promo code Bannon or /Bannon. Go check it out today.
War Room. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, Birchgold, birchgold.com /Bannon, End of the Dollar Empire. Most importantly, get you access to Philip Patrick and the team. 2 articles I want you to read that are not Birch articles. One is the Ray Dalio, basically dump bonds, buy gold. You should. I'm not saying you should do that. I'm saying that you should take some responsibility and learn this, because it is teachable. And then you can make your own decisions, but see what the pattern recognition is. 2 articles. One, the Washington Post had a great article about the issue with the $40 trillion in debt and the $2 trillion deficits, and what's that going to do for a death spiral. You should read that and understand it. It's pretty explainable. David Lynch, I think, is the writer. We've had David on a couple of times. We're trying to get him back on about this, and of course, Ray Dalio. But after you read those, make some notes. Go to Birch Gold. Maybe take your phone out, text Bannon, Bannon, at 989898, and talk to Philip Patrick and team. All the information's free. There's no obligation, but now more than ever, you should get up to speed. At 1 p.m. today, Scott Bessent is going to give a press briefing or press conference, make a statement about the economic war. So he calls it economic D-Day against the Persians, but really against the Chinese Communist Party, and a lot of these entities continue to trade with them and provide them cash money and buy their oil. Also, in a couple of weeks, we're supposed to get what's called fiscal consolidation, both on the revenue side and the cost-cutting side, from Russ Vought and Scott Bessent. Both of these will cause a little turmoil. That's why we're in a fourth turning, and you folks have got the access to the information and the access to the people that it can explain the information with Philip Patrick and his team. And Philip's going to join us again tomorrow, since there's so much going on in capital markets. Really honored to have Jason Killmeyer back from the Daily Caller. We asked him, he was on a couple weeks ago for the initial part of a multi-part series called Mass Deportations after the midterms. Today, you've come up with the second piece, I think, late last week. Walk us through, particularly in light of our previous guest, Troy Myers from Epoch Times, that tells us, hey, because of the legal situation, what President Trump and the team have done, you essentially have 1 million temporary protective status people that are now kind of free and clear to be shipped back to their home country. Walk us through. You've got this part today is about the machinery. Walk us through it, and if we're all ready to go, the question is going to be, why ain't we going? Jason, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, and if you remember in our first conversation, which I really enjoyed, we talked about, hey, like understanding what mass deportation is going to look like in 2027, 2028, it is a new and a different skill set. And so if it's a new and a different skill set, and we have populations who are now legally cleared to go, we need a new organization, a new type of way to accomplish this. And so my argument is not for another permanent layer of bureaucracy, but instead what we do is we stand up what's called a temporary service organization. It's the Title V, Section 3161. Americans are familiar with this because it's the exact authority invoked to stand up DOJ in the first days of this administration. So we stand up this organization with a Washington-based headquarters cell that has an interior enforcement czar as the lead, and maybe 8 to 10 other folks there at headquarters, Steve, to help with what we'll call the basic enterprise functions, right? Document issuance, major elements of contracting, legal, et cetera. And then we devolve as much authority down to what I'm calling 10 regional commanders who are responsible for a specific region and their country, making the logistics work and answering one question back to Washington on a daily basis, which is, did you meet your removal quota or not? And who do we need to bulldoze to make it happen tomorrow?
So walk me through this. You've thought this through and said, hey, if we just put it into the DHS bureaucratic apparatus, somehow it's going to deal with all the tribal fights they've got and all the vendettas and all that. You're saying use Title V, just like he did in Doge, set up a totally separate entity that goes away after the job's done, but very task-oriented, very focused on the removal of people. And that czar reports either directly to DHS or probably right to the president. And then the funding that we got, they get as much funding as they need to basically fulfill the obligation to remove, to start the process of removing the 22 million illegal aliens that came in under Biden's regime, and or holdovers like the TPS people that are now eligible to be removed. Sir, is that your model?
Yeah, and Steve, to your point there, this has got to be essentially run directly out of the White House. One, it's what you need to do to bulldoze people to get the obstacles done. Everything we're talking about is a function of political will, and I'll walk you through that in a second. So in my opinion, right, this will probably formally, from an administrative perspective, have to be seeded out of DHS, but it really needs to be run out of the White House. And we talked about, right, how do we bring these logistics to bear? Let me break down some basic things. I started from a proposition that was a very low-end estimate of just the people who came in through Biden. It was 10 million. And I just, again, use that number for planning purposes. Well, 2 years left in the administration. So let's say 730 days, that's 14,000 removals every day. About 30% of the illegal alien population right now are Mexicans. So let's say that we concentrate the vast majority of those removals on the ground. That's 4,200 people a day that go out that mechanism. We have 49,500 charter or commercial buses around the country. This is not a capacity issue. This is a function of political will. But when you start to look at that scale, 4,200 Mexicans a day, and then let's say it's 9,800 people that need to leave by air to go everywhere else in the world. That is, let's say an average airplane's 150 people, but that they'll be filled at 100 each. And you need security guards, and they're not going to be maximally full, right? So that's about 100 flights a day that the federal government needs to produce. When we're talking at that scale, it cannot be a DHS alone effort. That money can be repurposed as needed through MOUs and other mechanisms to pay back other departments as they help us. And President Trump knows this because in the very first national emergency declared at the border, January 2025, he explicitly called upon other departments to include DOD to begin helping with those logistics. He used the border wall authority, right, for construction, directed DOD to specifically help with transport. People remember that from early in the administration. There were, I think, some C-17s and other planes. This has got to be a function of broader national capacity.
Yeah. Jason, hang on 1 second. I'm going to take a short commercial. I will hold you over. A czar in the White House directly report to the president of these United States on a mass deportation programs that gets them the hell out of the country. Short commercial break. Back in the war in a moment.